Well, ladies and gentlemen, the truth is we must save Britain. If the title of this publication appears somewhat stark, it's because we at the New Culture Forum see it that way. Our country now exists in a state of emergency. The decline and decay is all around us. Millions of us have been reduced, I think, to powerless observers watching as the ground beneath our feet visibly gives way. There is an increasingly widespread realization that our political and our cultural elites work continuously against the interests of the public. There is no longer even the pretense that the views and beliefs of the majority are valued. Indeed, they are actively ignored or demonized. Free speech in Britain is now just a term. We have a governing class that's riven with incompetence, cowardice, and a complete inability to acknowledge the enormity of the problems which face us. The mainstream media increasingly acts as merely the carrier of acceptable political messaging, a kind of visual display unit, if you like, for the political and cultural establishment. Our institutions have been captured. Our schools indoctrinate our children. Our universities have become purveyors of hard left woke ideology and the unashamed enemies of free speech. Our police, having withdrawn almost entirely from the public space, enforce parts of the law and ignore others. The civil service regularly thwarts elected governments. Our museums, our cultural institutions and national organizations dedicate themselves to deconstructing our history and our heritage, and in the process delegitimizing the very point of their existence. The very language which we speak has been hijacked. Now, demographic change through unprecedented mass immigration on a historically unprecedented scale has undermined our collective memory and our sense of what we are. It has dangerously weakened the social contract between government and people. So, in all, we have been hollowed out from the inside. All around us we see an apparent apathy, a response to the all-pervading demoralization we continue to experience. This sense of powerlessness and despair which characterizes this country now is a very valid reaction, I believe, not just to those issues I've just outlined. It's also a product, too, of our specific experiences over the past decade. First of all, the reaction of our political, academic, business and media elites to the 2016 Brexit vote came as a shock to even the most cynical. The attempt to thwart the will of the people led many to the conclusion that our institutions were perhaps not what we thought they were. The spectacle of an unambiguous, democratically delivered decision being challenged and possibly reversed changed forever many people's attitudes to this country's institutions. This was followed, of course, by the official response to the COVID pandemic, a response that is increasingly discredited. And at the height of this, when the country was perhaps at its most powerless, we witnessed in 2020 a full-scale assault on our history and heritage in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd in the US and the Black Lives Matter protests. Coming seemingly out of the blue, the attack was delivered just as intensively, perhaps even more so, from within our own institutions as from anything happening outside. And it left many people reeling in bewilderment. But despite all of that, and this is crucial, the apathy and despair I describe should not be taken as resignation or an acceptance of the situation, because nothing could be further from the truth. The overwhelming majority of the public, what could now more be accurately described as the silenced majority, care deeply about this country and its future. They value its history, and they're proud of its heritage. This is despite years, decades of them being told that what they hold dear is not just valueless, but actively wrong. That they are not who they thought they were. That they are a cause of much of what is wrong with the world. That they simply have the wrong views and feelings, and that it's only right and proper that they should be excluded from the national conversation. Well, the New Culture Forum is, always has been, and always will be on their side. We recognise that the only meaningful fight in Britain now is between the elites and the people. I can't emphasise this enough. It's becoming clearer with every day. As George Orwell said, or rather should I say to paraphrase George Orwell, any hope there is for the future of our country relies now on the ordinary people. Now, this book is the natural follow-on from our two previous successful publications, as has already been pointed out. Mark Sidwell's The Long March, which detailed the takeover by the left of Britain's institutions, and Fighting Back, which brought together esteemed writers to outline the various ways which we might resist and challenge the cultural orthodoxies which have exerted such a grip. State of Emergency lays out plainly, in a series of 10 pledges, what we believe must happen to save Britain from cultural obliteration. They form, in effect, the New Culture Forum's manifesto. We are not a political party, but we can certainly lay increasing claim to being a political movement. Our growing network of local NCF groups across the country is testament to this. And thank you for Stephen for all the work you do there. So next year there will be a general election. We will be putting our pledges to all the candidates standing right across the country. By doing this, we'll be able to ascertain where those who seek to represent us truly stand on the future of our country. These pledges are backed up in this book by a series of superb essays which explore and explain the current situation as we see it and which provide the reasoning behind each pledge. Now, I've been saying this during a period in which we have seen regular large-scale demonstrations against Israel and the worst attacks on Jewish people that we've seen since the Holocaust. The extremism displayed, the sheer hatred and anti-Semitism exhibited by many of these protesters has led many to feel that they no longer recognize their own country. Certainly the response of the BBC and the police, amongst many other institutions, have been shameful. Now, taken together, these reactions, I believe, have opened the eyes of many to the problems that we face in this country. A wider public has seen vividly and inescapably that there are now in Britain large numbers of people who, far from integrating, actively hate this country and make no pretense even at sharing its values. These problems are huge, but they simply cannot be insurmountable. I hope that this volume provides inspiration for the millions, and that includes all of us here, who care about this country. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Welcome to the New Culture Forum. We're here in central London at our office, and it's an exciting night. It's the launch of our latest book, A State of Emergency, the third in our trilogy of publications, starting with The Long March and last year's Fighting Back, which aims to explain to you, the viewer, what's gone wrong in the country, how it got to this place, and a roadmap to how we start putting things back on the right track. Join me as I speak to some of the contributors, some of the authors, and some of the guests tonight to see what they think and what they have to say. So, Peter, it strikes me in the last few weeks that Overton window has shifted on what's acceptable to discuss the situation in the country. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, I kind of share a feeling, I think, with the rest of the country that something is broken, something has changed, there's been a snap or a break.
I was in a cab over here, and the cabbie said that something's bubbling.
Oh my God, you've just stolen my story. So I was literally just jumped in a cab to come over here to get this excellent new book that's available now. And the cab driver was saying the exact same thing. He feels like the nation has kind of crossed a Rubicon, and there's now the Overton window has indeed shifted, and now we're able to have a conversation about what's really happening in the country, and that's largely been facilitated by people like Peter Whittle and the New Culture Forum, who've kind of been pushing the agenda for a long time. The Overton window doesn't shift naturally, it has to be forced, really pushed hard, and that's happened. And so it's a credit to Peter and all his followers and all you guys, so yeah, it's great.
So Patrick, you've just written a rather interesting article in The Spectator. Can you tell us what that's about?
Well, really it's about Rishi Sunak having lost control over the sort of migration skeptic vote, both in terms of his failings on illegal migration, i.e. stop the boats, and also the level of legal migration. And, Suella Braverman exposing him on both fronts. And what a disaster this is for the Conservative Party going into the general election next year. There's actually some new polling out from YouGov tonight showing that immigration and asylum is now the top political priority of 2019 Conservative voters by 16 clear points above the economy. And those people, they're not saying that because they want more immigration. They're saying that because they are mightily fed up that no action has been taken to put a lid on it. And I think it's a massive opportunity for the Reform Party next year. And I think as far as a big chunk of the Conservative 2019 vote is concerned, next year's general election will be an immigration election, and they won't be able to bring themselves to vote Conservative as a result.
Well, that's it, because we find that the politicians have been going economy, and the wider country is going, well, if we don't have a culture, if we don't have a country, if we don't have a community, who cares?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. There's a huge part of your standard of living which is non-pecuniary, right? It's about your neighbourhood. It's about your infrastructure. It's also about whether you know and like your neighbours, and whether there's a cultural affinity going on. And there's a huge kind of friction and downside, and I think the sociologists used to call it anomie, about losing a feeling of ease in your public spaces, right? Which is worth more than Rishi Sunak might say, well, if you follow my technocratic economic approach, you might all be able to afford an extra Kit Kat on a Friday, right? That's not an offer that measures up to this catastrophic loss of social cohesion and neighbourliness.
So Dominic, we're here for the book launch. The title's State of Emergency. Is it DEFCON 5?
Well, the problem is an emergency is a sort of short-lived thing, but this is a sort of long-term,
it's a tragedy,
cumulative emergency that's been going on, we now know, for many years, but I think you have to sensationalise it in order to draw attention to it. Yeah.
Does it feel like something's shifted in the last couple of months in terms of the acceptable discourse and the way we're allowed to talk about our country and our culture?
It's shifting all the time, and I think we're certainly winning the argument, but I'm not sure we're winning the war.
Yeah, I saw on X today, Elon said that the woke have become a laughingstock. Is that your estimation too?
Well, they're quite easy to make fun of and make jokes about, and I think if you think about how nuts socialism got in the 70s, in the 80s, in the sort of the last great culture war, which was the left v right, Thatcher and all that. But they just became a laughingstock. You know, Monty Python and the Judean People's Front and all those kind of things. You didn't need to write it almost; it wrote itself. And we've reached those levels of silliness And there's one thing the authoritarian hates, and that's being mocked.
So Connor, we're here at the launch of the NCF's latest book, State of Emergency. Is it really DEFCON 5?
For the Conservative Party, I'd say so. I mean, when you're getting MPs like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Miriam Cates coming out, making sensible observations saying, if we don't address mass migration by the next election, we will have like a 300-seat wipeout. If they're saying it to their own front bench, maybe they should listen. But the front bench's ears are deaf. I mean, I would know about ears. By the appointment of David Cameron back as the Foreign Secretary, they're not even pretending to be pro-Brexit anymore, or on the side of the populists who lent them their vote in 2019 that said, well, we'd like national sovereignty, we'd like you to stop faffing about something we settled 3 years ago, and to stop flooding our communities with people who don't consider us their countrymen. It's not just about an economic argument. That's the thing that both sides of the Brexit debate got wrong. One side was talking about being in the European members bloc, the other side was thinking about global Britain, how we can import all of the world's skilled workers, £26,000 a year, into Britain. Actually, what most of the British people that voted Brexit wanted was a sense of community, a sense of self-ownership, and to say, well, I didn't consent to the world on my doorstep changing at fundamentally such a rapid rate. And so now they've seen that, with 1.2 million people entering the country last year, plus 30,000 seafaring insurgents have decided to just break their way in. Well, why are they going to vote for the Conservatives again when they've broken all of their promises? So it's DEFCON 5 for the current political establishment. Who knows what's coming after?
So guys, we're here at the launch of the New Culture Forum's latest book, State of Emergency. Is it really a state of emergency? Have things got that bad?
Yes, indeed, I think they have. Yeah, I've been watching for many, many years and been very complacent for most of them. I have to add that I used to be a revolutionary socialist.
Just like Hitchens.
Sorry?
Just like Hitchens.
Oh, just like Hitchens, indeed. Are you talking about Peter or the other one? Yeah.
State of emergency?
I think we have a very serious situation going on. Things have got to a certain point where people we can't be complacent, as we've been for a long time, lazy and complacent. I think many of us feel there's an attack on our culture, our history, our society. You see what's going on. I think absolutely there's a point now where I think our views and opinions are shared by the majority of the people. So why is this happening? Why are things going on that the majority of the population don't support? So I think we have to get a grip of this.
Get a grip. Yeah. And so in your lives, how have you noticed the decay in the country?
More lately, because of political correctness and the policing and self-censoring. And the most worrying thing is close friends who still cannot see my point of view. They don't know what I'm talking about. Intelligent, well-educated people that makes me actually lose confidence as to whether I'm going a bit nuts or not. But yet they are self-censoring, and I'm being picked up on all sorts of language and opinions, which in the past they would have agreed with.
I would pick up on close friends and say close friends are nervous to express their opinions. So this is the land of free speech, but we're not seeing that. People are nervous about expressing an opinion if it isn't echoed by what you see on the mainstream news stations. And another aspect I've seen, when I grew up as a young guy, we respected the police because they were tough and they enforced the law unequivocally. Now they seem interested in chasing after law-abiding people that may have said something that doesn't resonate with the head of police.
It's a disgrace, isn't it?
It's an absolute disgrace.
Absolutely. Cool. So, Harrison, you did a chapter in the book. Tell us about your chapter.
My chapter was on the phenomenon which was christened by Michael Gove, I think 10 years ago or so, as the blob. And to give a very quick definition of the blob, I would define it as a nexus of intermediary institutions and public bodies which contains enough like-minded mandarins to command a significant influence over the government of the country, regardless of what the majority thinks in the nation at large. And so to that extent, they squash democracy proper, and they allow democracy to degenerate into what Alexis de Tocqueville called the soft despotism of a tutelary elite.
So is this why a politician will stand up and say we're going to get a grip on immigration finally, and then nothing happens?
Precisely that. I mean, well, this is the one thing that I wanted. I was I made a concerted effort in my little chapter to make sure that I wasn't letting the Tory party off the hook too much, saying, oh, well, they're not responsible because they've been thwarted by a blob.
They bloody are.
They are extremely responsible, and not only, and I'll give you one point of contact with this, because there are lots of things that could be mentioned, but to give you one point of contact with this, like I phrase it this way: that the Conservative Party has at best tolerated the blob, and at worst enabled it to do even more of its, obstructive, to get up to its obstructive business. And so, to give you one example, many people in Britain, many people on our side of the political spectrum would complain at the way in which the Equality Act has enabled the spread of diversity, equity and inclusion across the public sector. Far from repealing that, as they should have done on their first day in office, as soon as they had a majority to do so, the Conservatives actually expanded the Equality Act in 2017 to impose a duty on all public bodies to publish annual equity objectives to ensure that every single public institution published measurable equity objectives to demonstrate progress on the extent to which they were diversifying, making things more equitable in racial, gender and sexual terms, all the rest of it. And as a result, we've seen the DEI sector in this country, both public and private, expand by something like 71% between 2015 and 2021. So yes, there are many individual cases where the blob thwarts genuine Conservative policy, and there may be some ministers who deserve some credit, but the Conservative Party at large as a political organism enables the blob. It is fully signed up to their crowning agenda, namely diversity, equity and inclusion.
It's completely nuts. I mean, in 2010, the country voted for a Conservative Party, and what we got was Blair on steroids.
Absolutely. To give you, again, another point of contact with the detail, it's very hilarious when you come across these supposedly centrist figures in the Tory party who say, well, gosh, we've been far right for 13 years, we need to go back to sensible centrism. Immigration is currently running at 12 times what it was under John Major. And John Major is exactly the kind of person who would position himself as a sort of sensible moderate. Yeah. And so, but by his own standards, in the 1990s, he was overseeing immigration rates which, by today's standards, the standards that he invokes today at least, he would presumably dismiss as far right or Fourth Reich. So it goes to show how much our Overton window has shifted, that someone like John Major can argue, or anyone, as a matter of fact, anyone who kind of positions himself as a sensible centrist can argue that we're living under some kind of far-right government. Nothing could be further from the case, and the immigration figures are perhaps the best way of illustrating that in a short burst.
So, Philip, the title of the book, State of Emergency, Is it an emergency?
I think it is. It was interesting that Stephen, who's just been speaking, Stephen, the editor, was saying when we came up with the title, it was on the 7th of October, because it was our conference date. And we thought at that time, it might be a bit much saying state of emergency, and people might not think that. Now, a month and a half later, with marches and demonstrations and anti-Semitism and hatred on the streets every week, not just in London, but in all of the cities as well, I think there is a state of emergency, and I think we're in a terrible situation.
I was chatting to a cabbie on the way over here, and he was saying that they are, on every Saturday, they are not able to earn their money and perform their business like they would, because we're seeing people who seem so alien to the culture out on the streets, screaming slogans which the country doesn't resonate with.
Yeah, I think it's true of cabbies. I think it's true of other people who are trying to earn a living, because most decent people are in a situation now, and this is incredible. This is 2023 in Britain, right? Most decent people are in a situation where we won't go into the town centre on Saturday because of all of this stuff that's going on. If you're Jewish, you certainly won't go into a town centre because all of this stuff is going on. It's awful. It is a state of emergency. I think the good thing about this book is we don't just isolate and highlight the problems, we offer solutions. And every single chapter, my own included, which is about gender ideology in schools, which is a massive problem, we offer a whole set of solutions to the problems there.
It feels like the window's shifting, especially the gender ideology in schools, where we're seeing parents stand up, finally. Would you agree with that?
I think so, because one of the few really good things about social media is that things spread very quickly. Okay, and parents are beginning to understand the detail of what children are being taught in schools.
And they didn't know that before. Okay, still a lot of them still don't, but a lot of them really didn't know that. I mean, my chapter is quite shocking because I start with 9-year-olds being taught how to masturbate as homework. That's, it's unbelievable.
No, it beggars belief.
It's unbelievably awful. So I wrote the chapter in a state of anger, really, real anger. And I don't usually do that because I'm an academic. I like to kind of take myself away. I like to be objective about what I'm writing. But no, I let myself go with the anger, and I just went with it because it really deserves it.
So Sheila,
yes,
we talk again, and since we spoke last, it seems like the mood in the country has shifted.
very much so. I'd say the mood of the world has shifted. I think we're living through a seminal moment, and I watch agog as events unfold. I'm not one of these people who mouth off on social media. I like to absorb what's going on and try to learn from those who know better. I'm utterly horrified at events that have unfolded abroad, and it makes something like this all the more important.
So in that book there are 10 pledges.
Yes.
Which would you say for you is the most important?
Oh, that's really difficult. I would say, all right, I'll pick number one because I think that is crucial.
That's an end to mass migration, yeah?
An end to mass migration. We're in a country now that isn't multicultural, it's sort of multi-monocultures with peoples that don't integrate, don't know about the country that they're in.
The message from the electorate is to the politicians, enough is enough, your experiment hasn't worked.
Experiment hasn't worked. I don't know where they think they are. Are they just, as Matthew Goodwin says, just working on their pet projects? I've just never known anything like this total disconnection. It's quite extraordinary.
So Neil, we're here at the launch of the book. You contributed, you wrote a chapter. Tell us about the chapter.
I've written a chapter on the first pledge against mass immigration and the fact that it has to be stopped. It clearly poses the biggest threat to...
Stopped or reversed?
Stopped for the time being. And we shall... we have to stop mass immigration, full stop. I mean, there is no doubt about it. The scale of immigration in recent years is completely unprecedented in the history of these islands. It has no historical basis. There's no basis upon which it should be justified economically, socially, culturally.
Immigration to me is kind of like the bus in in the Italian Job. You know, if we put the brakes on, we're still going over the cliff, and we need to pull back from the cliff. Do you agree?
Well, that's a different issue that we have to consider. Firstly, we have to stop. You cannot deal with a problem if you're keeping adding to the problem.
Agree.
So therefore, the first thing we have to do is massively reduce levels of immigration into the UK. When we've dealt with that problem, and we're not going to deal with it with the current technocratic managerial approach being offered by government and the think tanks and all of this, we need a new vision for how we exist and function as a country and what it means to be British and what it means to belong to this country. We need a whole new conceptualisation of citizenship. We need to recognise that this is not just a transactional thing that you acquire after a few years. This is something that must be earned, and it's something that should not just be given away on the basis of abstract notions of common values and shared ideas. We are a nation, and a nation requires a deeper historical understanding of itself.
Hello, if you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.